Okay, hope everyone is replenished from their break. I'm back. We've got a really great group here to talk about hacking civic engagement and how did we use technology to address the issue of civic engagement and also to do things based on what we found after engaging the public. So I will let you guys each introduce yourselves, and my request is to tell us a little bit about the end results of what you guys did, having gone out and engaged the public and tried to identify challenges and solutions. And then we'll come back and talk more about the process through which we got there. So Khanh, why don't we start with you? Tell us about what you guys did that was super cool that resulted in you being on this stage today.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Scott, for moderating, and to City of Service for the opportunity. We're just so honored to be among such incredible peers. So the end result for us was a drone that can go and paint over freeway signs and walls that were graffitied, right? And I think for us, it was really important because one of the things that you'll experience in the Bay Area is our traffic is really bad. So if you're stuck in traffic and you're staring at this graffiti every day for 3 minutes, it starts to affect how you're perceiving the city. You think it's much less safe than it really is, or it's dirtier than it really is. So our civic engagement strategy was to put out a call and have people develop a technology to help create, to help paint over that graffiti.
Fantastic. Annie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys did? And I think you even have some visuals to share with us.
So our main result was a budget, a city budget that was more aligned with community needs and perspectives, and actually being able to tell the story a little bit around some of the changes in the budget that happened as a result of that public engagement. So we have success stories that directly link to what we heard, and we were able to create a public engagement report based on all the different tools and outreach methods that we did. So we have a visual that we can give to leadership as well as the community, and they're able to see, wow, that's what they heard, and this is what leadership is using as part of their tool to see.
Great. Can we cue that up?
Yeah.
There's someone. Oh, perfect. Look at
that. Here. So one of the tools that we used to get that information is it's a balancing act, and it is a tool that actually lets you convey to the community what the real price of government is and the price of different services. So a lot of people have it fixed in their mind what a budget or what city government should cost, but unfortunately the real price continues to rise all the time, and we need to figure out a way to communicate what those actual prices, what the actual money does, and show people that their taxes are delivering these services that they are asking for, and how that kind of plays out. So a lot of people might look at this and say, transportation costs $98.6 million. How is the average member of the community to know that that's an accurate amount, that's an appropriate amount? So we need to show what that is really made up of. So what this tool does is break the government up into service areas that we call our outcome areas, and to create different levels of that information. We have our outcome areas, and then we break that down into themes, because when the city puts forth budget requests, and this year there's 517 budget requests, I think. So not a lot of people are going to go through and read every one of those, even though some people want to, so we make sure that level is available too. But we've created these different levels with the help of a balancing act, so people can not only determine their different levels and go through this tool, but they can also really get to the heart of the issue. Because what we want to know is not just exactly how much money you think we should spend, but what is truly important to you. Finding that dollar amount that really resonates with the priority of a person is very hard to do, but tools like this allow us to see.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks.
allow us to kind of translate what the true priorities of the community are into those dollar amounts. So this example here, you can see transportation is one of our outcome areas, and the themes include bicycle, pedestrian, and accessibility improvements, and we also have bus service, parking availability, so people can go into this based on their interest levels and create their very own city budget, and we get back in data that shows what people created or what their priorities were. And so here, and this is something that we're building right now, this is perfect timing for us because the budgeting process and all the public engagement kind of rolls out next week. So this is very much in the process, but we built in a scenario question. Should the city expand bus service? That's a lot more understandable than saying $6.2 million, is that accurate? So here you can see a little bit more information. People can go in, learn about where we kind of are right now, and then they can go a little bit deeper and see that in 2017, Transport saw a 6% increase in ridership and fulfilled a top community request by implementing Sunday and holiday service for 5 routes. Has this service met your needs? So you can actually see a picture in here, you can upload videos, and you can even go and get the supplemental information that you maybe need to make that decision. Do these schedules meet my needs?
Great.
Yeah.
Cool. This is really exciting. We're going to dig into that in a little bit. Kris, tell us about what you guys have been doing down in Boston.
Yeah.
Up in Boston.
So the project that we've been working on is about safe driving. So Boston is notorious for maybe not having the best drivers on the roadways. Allstate Insurance ranked us 2 years in a row as the worst city to drive in. They've only given out that award for 2 years, so we're batting 100%.
Clean sweep.
Coincidentally, also, we have a Vision Zero program that's about eliminating traffic fatalities, serious injuries from the roadway. Last year, we had about 23 people that were killed in Boston, another 4,000 seriously injured. And we were struggling with how we start having a community conversation about driving behaviors. There's some superiority bias or Lake Wobegon effect. If you ask people if they're a good driver, they all say they are. But it turns out that's not the case, right? We're not all above average. So what we did was we put together an app with a local startup called Cambridge Mobile Telematics, and we created a competition. We put that app out into the public and said, prove that you're a good driver, prove to your neighbor, your friend, your partner if you are a good driver, and this is sort of an aggregate score out of 100 of how good you are. And then we incentivize that with prizes and things. We had about 5,000 people use that over a 3-month span. And what we saw was, for the top 25% of users, we saw phone distraction, the phone use in that app, go down by about 50%. So people were less likely to be playing with their phone while they're driving. We saw speeding decrease by about 1/3. And we know that those are 2 things that are really contributing to the fatalities and injuries on our roadways.
That's fantastic. I think we have a map. Here we go.
Yeah, so this is showing over the span of about a week, the incidences related to speeding and phone use on a map of Boston. As you can see, those sort of major roadways light up. The different colors are sort of those different things. We measured 5 things within the app: speeding, harsh braking, phone use, acceleration, and turning, movements that are too abrupt. So the speeding is all in red. The green is in phone use. If you're on a bicycle in our city, you're terrified on those streets because everybody is looking at a phone.
That's very challenging. This is exciting. So we've got 3 different outcomes, right? And we've got 3 different things that people were trying to solve. And the unifying factor here is there was a need that was identified either externally, in the case of Allstate, very helpfully telling you guys how you're doing on your roads. In the case of Fort Collins, explaining you guys seeing the trends, the inverse trends in terms of citizen happiness and cost per citizen. And the frustration that drivers in San Jose felt when they saw hard-to-reach graffiti going unmet. For the group, and I'll let you guys decide amongst yourselves who can go first, tell us about how we came to identify these issues as being the biggest problem.
Oh, maybe I can start. When Mayor was campaigning, he got a lot of feedback from the community and constituents regarding the issue of blight and graffiti in our community. And as I kind of alluded to before, blight and graffiti is kind of a canary in the mine for us because it speaks to civic pride and also speaks to a sense of safety and security for the community. But because these are graffiti on street signs on the highway, well, the only way for us to actually clean that is to shut down the highway. right? And you only do that in the evening at night. And then you have to bring out the lights and the cranes to ensure a high level of safety. It was costing us almost $60,000 a pop to like clean up these signs. So we thought there must be a better way. So the mayor developed a competition called Unleash Your Geek. And the first competition was to really excite our technologists, our innovators, our makers. And being that we're Silicon Valley, we had an asset within our citizens. They're naturally digitally natives. They are technologists. They work for companies like GoPro and drone companies. And we called out to them to say, hey, can you help us develop a better solution? And we put the call out. We got 140 submissions. We had university teams put in robotics solutions. We had chemists provide solutions that would dissolve the graffiti off the sign, and then we had people submitting drone solutions. So I think that for us was what kind of prompted it, and for us is a way to kind of continue to build community pride.
Great. How about in Fort Collins? I mean, this I feel was a bit more of a fundamental issue at hand. So maybe there wasn't really a need beyond just saying, hey, these two metrics aren't going the way we want.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and also as public servants, I feel like we know very much all the things that municipal governments do, right? We know about the wires under the ground and the pipes and all of these amazing things that we do every day and the services that are delivered to people. But I think a lot of those things are kind of, I mean, underground. They are a little bit almost in the dark, in the secret. People don't really know what municipal governments really entail a lot of the times. And so the fact that the price of government was continuing to go up and that set amount that people were willing to pay was staying the same, this really gave us an opportunity to tell our story of this is what we really do. This is kind of why you should care about this. This is your money. We want to be sure we're using it the right way. So in terms of like a specific problem, I think they rose up in all different ways, but it's a lot more foundational, yeah.
And similarly in Boston, you guys had you had a top-down program in Vision Zero. You had this external factor come in and tell you something you may have already known. What led to this as the mechanism for both? It sounds like both gathering data and changing behavior.
Yeah. You know, we have a Vision Zero task force, and on that task force, it's a whole bunch of different agencies, but there's citizen representation also in there, an advocacy community. And what we realized was we were getting really good at sharing data back and forth, which took us a while to figure that out between agencies. We were getting better at building a capital plan that was addressing the engineering challenges of our roadways and making those safer, but that's a long game. What we were struggling with was an education component, right? So if you think of the Vision Zero being sort of about enforcement and education and engineering and an equity lens, we were trying to figure out what's a new way that we can have this conversation that it doesn't diverge or into this like modal argument, you know, like cyclists always run stoplights and pedestrians don't use the crosswalks, right? Let's just have a conversation with each other. So can the city sort of seed that conversation for us to have that as neighbors? And that was where that came from, from a couple of researchers that we work with, and from one of the advocacy groups that said, look, we're tired of having this bickering argument. Can we just try to have a conversation about how you're doing, compared to your friend or your neighbor? And maybe the city takes a step back, but just sort of starts that conversation.
Talk to me. We mentioned in the case of San Jose, there were these latent talent, that this desire to go and I imagine just some desire to go do stuff. If you run a drone company and the city of San Jose says, hey, do you want to spray graffiti off of our street signs? That's amazing.
Yeah.
How do you all think about these public-private partnerships and fostering innovation or taking down barriers or just getting local folks to share what they're doing and making it valuable to the city? Cool. I think the San Jose examples may be somewhat apparent, so maybe we'll start with Fort Collins or with Boston.
In terms of, I'll go. But in terms of our nonprofits and our community partners, I'm a liaison to those partners, so I might be slightly biased, but I think they're our greatest asset because they have the trust of these populations that we're trying to reach. They have the trust of the people. They have an existing platform, whether that's a physical open house or an email list that they are able to reach these people with. And in terms of talking about trust of government, even if that's not necessarily great in some of those populations, it's probably great with those community partners. And working with those community partners really builds that trust and helps you reach a much more diverse audience and hear, really be able to get to the heart of the matter a little bit, hear more honest opinions. People feel comfortable in spaces they're familiar with. The benefits are just endless. So I think as much work as possible with those community partners.
Fantastic. How about in Boston with the telematics company?
Yeah, on the innovation side in Boston, I think we try to make it our business and our team to just build those relationships with interesting researchers. We're a college town. I spent a lot of time across the river in Cambridge, though, and at Harvard and MIT, and then at BU and other places. We don't know where those relationships are going to go usually, and eventually they develop into something. So for Cambridge Mobile Telematics, we knew those researchers before they had a company. And then once they had a company and they were selling into big insurers, we said, wouldn't it be cool if we did something together? And they said yes. And then to the point of the community partners, it's hard for the city to then say, well, let's take money and throw something at this, a little bit risky. And we gave away $10,000 worth of prize money, which is also a little bit hard for the city to say, let's pay residents to drive. So we needed a funder, and then we needed advocacy groups to say, well, if you develop this by yourself, city, you'll probably get it wrong, so let us help you. And that built in things like, tracking transit trips, tracking bike trips, and giving away prizes for those too, ferry trips, that kind of thing.
How about in San Jose? I imagine there was the competition for whose drone and which solution must have been fierce.
It was pretty fierce. We had 140 submissions, and I think for us to engage our community, we really try to think about the ecosystem to really incentivize the innovators themselves, right? Hackathons only get you so far. That's great for generating ideas, but we wanted people to actually develop a solution that can actually be used. So we added a couple of things to it. There was prize money, and then there was also money that people can use to actually manufacture their product. We made sure that they had technical advisors through our partner Prospect Silicon Valley. They had a space where they can build the prototype and then actually manufacture the prototype. We had a partnership with the United States Patent and Trade Office to ensure that the intellectual property of these individuals were going to be protected throughout this process. And then we told them that we would then be clients, right? So San Jose and Caltrains, which runs our state highway system, would potentially be clients and continue to iterate with them, making sure that it meets all of the specifications to meet all of the city and state regulations. So from the initial prototype, now there's actually multiple versions of the drones that can crawl underneath highways and across walls. So it's really exciting to see how that progressed. But that was the real incentive, right? The $5,000 that you got for winning was less of an incentive. It was that you can potentially get a multi-million-dollar contract with the state and Caltrans to really, put in the time.
That's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about inclusiveness and making sure that we're hearing from all of the voices that we want to hear from when we're thinking about community engagement, whether it's involving this project or more broadly in your work. Let's start with Annie.
My position is actually, I do a lot of the normal project management and developing these things, but I have an extra focus in those harder to reach populations. And so I have a lot of passion around this, and something that I think technology really helps us do is create new access points, right? And this really connects with the topic of community partners as well, because not only do they get just the process itself out there, but they're sharing it in terms of an invitation to get those people to come join. So we worked with a local community group that worked very closely with people with disabilities, the ADA boards and commissions, things along those lines, and they were actually able to be just very vital in the process and being there, physically being there, talking to representatives, inviting us to groups, because that's what we're trying to do as much as possible. Invite us and we'll come to you. Invite us and we'll come to you rather than trying to set a fixed point for them to come to. We actually had members of the community come to City Hall and they wrote a song for the budget. Yeah, they had people playing a guitar, writing about their request for Transport, which is our bus service and one of our biggest success stories around budget and public engagement. We were able to do some partnerships in the community and expand our bus service to Sunday for select routes and expand that service a little bit. So hearing those stories specifically, I think, is what makes those projects successful, because one of the people that came to City Hall with the guitar player, he uses a wheelchair, and he said, very, very pointedly, I don't disappear on Sunday. Yeah, if you hear something like that, it resonates very strongly with these specific budget requests and needs from the community, and those stories are what drive them forward. So I think whatever you can do to get them there and also to join them where they are.
Great. Con?
I think for San Jose Mayor Liccardo, equity, inclusion, opportunity, social justice are at the forefront of everything that we do. And I think the ecosystem we set up was to ensure that there was this level of equity, right? Not everybody has access to a $3,000 3D printer. Not everyone has access to a laser cutter. So by partnering with folks like Prospect Silicon Valley, with Tech Shop, we made sure that people had the tools they need in order to just really generate and build upon a great idea.
Tech Shop is such a great resource in the Bay Area, right, for doing exactly those kinds of things. How about in Boston? How did you make sure all the voices were heard? How did you make sure you didn't just have the amazing drivers signing up for the telematics?
We stood out on traffic corners and handed out flyers to people. Actually, one of the ways that we got towards maybe drivers that were more likely to break the rules, we did targeted outreach through the RMV and also in the parking ticket office. We had big banners when you walked in that was like, win back essentially what you just paid in your ticket for this contest. So that was sort of one channel, but I think we also knew that a digital process can't be the only thing. There has to be an analog component to it. So we were at a whole bunch of different community meetings talking about this broader issue around traffic violence in our city, and going to community groups that were sort of raising their hands and saying, please come and talk with us about this, and using that as a channel too. And I think that's incredibly important to balance, to be aware that digital can have some blind sides to it, and making sure that you're balancing your outreach.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, my view kind of echoes y'all, which is you get this incredible new signal from digital. And if anything, it gives you more time to spend the effort to go out and reach the people who can't get on that track. And I think the important thing is that you're intentional about it. I want to open it up to questions. And so let's do the same thing we did last time, but hopefully we'll have time for more questions this time. While we're doing that, let me just ask, what's next? So how do you take the learnings from what you've done here? What's the next big mountain to go tackle?
In City of Fort Collins, I'd say in terms of the budget, the biggest mountain for us is getting even more people involved, because pretty much everybody wants a say in how their tax dollars are spent, but I don't know that a lot of people are sitting around thinking about the city budget and really connecting those two items. So yeah, I think being able to reach a broader amount of people and sharing the success stories that we've had even more, because this is something that I kind of piggyback on what Kris said, but the community partners and the ability that they have to help us report back is what really makes the next time we go out more successful. So I want to put extra focus in terms of the reporting back, what we heard last time, as well as integrating more education into the overall process, because people just come at it from all over the place in terms of knowledge. Some people are the ones that have read 517 offers. Other people are just realizing that budgeting for outcomes, that's what we call our budget process, is a thing. They're just starting to expect or understand that they have a say in this. So we really have to create those different levels of education for people to even understand what this is and then move forward.
Great. Kris, tell us about what's next.
Yeah, for Boston Safest Driver, actually, we have a grant from the National Safety Council to expand the program over 2018, 2019. We're going to work with 150 large employers in the city to seed competitions directly in those places. And then we've scaled to the state of Oregon, city of Seattle, city of San Antonio.
Wow.
With the exact same program with the same partner. So that's been pretty exciting. And then we're also starting to take the data that we got from the back end of the app, so where these instances are happening, fuse that with some other data that we collect on safety concerns and sort of redeploy our capital resources in this year's budget a little bit to address some of those concerns we've seen.
That feels like a really powerful incentive, even beyond the money, to say if you're one, it's almost like being a Nielsen family in your car.
Exactly, right? You can be this citizen data scientist by sort of just contributing this.
Exactly. Khan, what's next now that you've tackled graffiti with drones?
So our 2.0 came out of, unfortunately, disaster we had last year. San Jose, after a 5-year drought, we had a huge flood that forced us to evacuate 14,000 people.
Wow.
So I think for us, our second competition is creating a sensor in our waterway that better informs us what the water level and the rate of speed is. There was a little bit of a blame game between the city and the water district, so we're trying to provide more tools and information to help us address this in the future. And then our 3.0 Unleash Your Geek is going to be dealing with blockchain and voter registration.
Wow. High tech. Let's go to some questions. Here we go.
Yes, my question is to Khan. I wanted to ask, I was really intrigued with using drone for remove graffiti, and you mentioned that the initial cost was like $60,000 a pop. What kind of reduction in cost have you all experienced?
Yeah.
And then two, is this technology ready to be shared or exported to other communities?
So we're still in the development phase, so unfortunately we don't have any numbers on the reduction in costs. I can tell you it costs us $4 million, though, annually to kind of fix some of these issues. So we're hoping that's going to be a significant savings. And then the goal absolutely is to scale this technology once it's available. So I can start bringing you into the conversation and then really thinking about the different use cases that your community might have versus our community.
Great. Who has the mic? Oh. Here we go.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Natalie from the city of Newark. I can't help but notice that your titles are quite unique and not very common of city government titles, and I'm curious if you could speak to the sort of precursors for success to get to where you guys are able to do this very innovative kind of civic engagement in terms of like what folks that are a little earlier in the process might need to employ to get to where you're at a few years down the road.
Yeah.
I can start with that. I've only been with the city for just shy of 3 years, so I've got to hear the tale of success and how this all started from others, which is really great. And Ginny, I'm going to point you out, would be a wonderful person for you two to connect. She can tell even more of the history of when it really got started. But I think our most important resource was leadership and actually saying this isn't an option. We are going to be including the public in this. We're going to be examining our processes with the fine-tooth comb and including data, and then having that trickle-down effect is probably the reason it really was able to move forward. And then even me just having I work in the communications and public involvement office, my immediate boss is so supportive of trying new things. So there have been absolute failures. We had a public meeting that we did everything in Spanish. We did all the outreach we should have done, childcare, food, and nobody showed up. So you have to be able to have a failure, and we haven't had that happen since. We just learned from it. And sometimes that's going to continue to happen. So I think having that leadership support and willingness to try something and do it again. It's not going to be perfect the first time. Mm-hmm.
I would say practice meditation. Lots of deep breathing, lots of patience, and then I think have an empathy and understanding that city staff has a lot of expertise, right? It's a little bit about being able to translate between, having a technologist role or a data role with city staff who've been incredible leaders and really understand the nuances and the challenges. So I think that translation is really important.
And New Urban Mechanics is a particularly unique structure, even among unique structures, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So we're sort of an innovation team embedded inside city government. Started 8 years ago under the previous mayor, Tom Menino. There was a recognition by the mayor at that time that if we put innovation on the list of things to get done, that it would fall very quickly to the bottom of the list for everybody as they had to plow streets and pick up trash and those kind of things. So it was the decision to make a very discrete team that just thinks about what is new and next and really focuses in on human-centered challenges within that. And there's a need to do that because it becomes hard to do innovation if you have to do other things. Failing in government is really hard to do, right? Well, it can be easy to do, but it's not. It doesn't get you reelected, right? So to create a risk aggregator for the broader organization of the city becomes important. And then being able to have a department that just says yes a lot of the time, more than it says no, is a really valuable thing to build relationships with constituents.
And is able to say yes.
Correct.
Not just
like that is the mandate,
yeah.
right? That we are supposed to say yes, and let's figure it out.
Great. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Here, off to the side. We can get him a mic.
Hi, I'm Joe McKayley from York in the UK. It's a question for Khan. Hi, Khan, about the drone. And I know this is sort of about scale with difference between UK and US and size of cities, but I think one of the things we found in the UK, we have a problem with graffiti in public spaces, but one of the things we found to be very successful is the value of bringing local councillors, public officials and citizens together to address that, often through removing the graffiti and painting over it.
Absolutely.
And then the graffiti doesn't come back. So I just wondered, with the introduction of the drone, is the graffiti coming back? Because it might be perceived that the state is still doing it.
That's a really great point. And luckily for us, we have so much graffiti that we're going to be able to do the drone and have public officials in the community come out. But I think making sure that the community has a sense of ownership and buy-in with regards to what's happening in their immediate space is really important. So absolutely, and that's something we'll continue to incorporate.
That's a great point. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, Jean Setzman from AARP. This question is for Kris in Boston. For older constituents, we're really concerned about safe driving as well. And we actually know that vehicle technology actually extends safe driving for many people. So I'm really curious about the pilot that you have and around privacy, which is, I think, something that we hear amongst our members if we're going to test out this whole notion of telematics.
Yeah, it's a great point. Getting somebody to download an app is a hard thing to do to begin with. Getting someone to download an app that the government might watch your travel behavior, really hard, right? So we spent a lot of time up front with our legal counsel trying to figure out how we would protect that kind of information from a FOIA request, and that was incredibly important. And then in the messaging that we had the mayor do sort of on the launch, it was really stressing that this is about self-reflection, that the city doesn't actually see personal data, that it gets aggregated and then destroyed after a certain amount of time. We spent a lot of time in doing a plain language definition of what happens to that data. It's like the second thing you see on the website. It's what are you collecting, who gets it, and why. That was the start of the conversation, but we still had to have dozens, if not hundreds, of conversations individually with people that would call and ask, because the telematics question is out there. I mean, right, all the Uber and Lyft drivers all have telematics running on their phones. Probably most of those gig drivers don't know it. And that we need to have a pretty robust conversation about privacy in transportation that we're maybe not having as much as we should.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for doing the work that you're doing. I think it's so exciting to see this marriage of technology and civic engagement to solve real practical problems, whether it's from the budgetary standpoint, from a quality of life standpoint, or from a safety standpoint. And thank you all for being here. And I'm excited to see what you all do next. And I'm sure we all are excited to see what you're all going to do next.
Thank you.
Thank you all.